Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when a global music icon, known for her fearless opinions, faces off with one of daytime TV's sharpest talk show hosts? On The View, Cher took the hot seat across from Joy Behar to tackle a question that's dividing America. Should the U.S. stop sending money to foreign wars and fix its own problems first? The episode opened with the usual banter, Cher's signature wit and Joy's quick humor lighting up the studio. But the moment the topic shifted to government spending and foreign interventions, the mood changed. Cher, never one to hold back, leaned forward and questioned decades of U.S. foreign policy, arguing passionately that domestic crises, healthcare, infrastructure, poverty, deserved priority. Joy, equally fiery, countered with her perspective, emphasizing America's role in global stability and international obligations. As the debate intensified, the audience murmured in surprise. Cher's voice rang with conviction, her eyes flashing, while Joy's expressions carried that mix of skepticism and challenge she's known for. The conversation was no longer lighthearted. It was a full-blown clash of ideals. By the time the first commercial break came, the audience was buzzing. Social media lit up, with viewers debating whether Cher's stance was patriotically responsible or dangerously naive. Joy's quick rebuttals and pointed questions only added fuel to the fire. And then, in a moment that would shock everyone, Cher's next words left the audience and her co-hosts speechless, setting the stage for one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history.
The studio lights brightened as The View returned from a short break. The audience's chatter hummed with anticipation. Cher, dressed in a striking black outfit with her signature oversized sunglasses perched atop her head, sat confidently across from Joy Behar, who leaned forward with her trademark mix of curiosity and skepticism. Joy opened the discussion, her tone light but pointed. "Cher, we're thrilled to have you here, but let's get straight to it. Some people say America should stop spending billions on foreign wars and focus on fixing problems at home. What's your take?" Cher didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. I mean, how can we justify sending money overseas when our hospitals are crumbling, schools are failing, and people are struggling to put food on the table? It's insane." The audience murmured in agreement, some nodding vigorously, others whispering to neighbors. Joy leaned back, her voice calm but sharp. "I hear you, Cher, but some argue that America has a responsibility to maintain global stability. If we retreat entirely, we risk emboldening hostile powers and creating chaos that eventually comes back to us." Cher's eyes flashed. "And I say that chaos is already here. Our cities are in crisis, our veterans are suffering, our kids are drowning in debt. We can't keep paying for conflicts that don't solve anything." Sonny Hostin jumped in, attempting to mediate. "Cher, I get that domestic priorities are important, but defense spending and foreign aid have strategic purposes. It's not always just about dollars disappearing. It's about influence, alliances, and national security." Cher waved her hand dismissively. "Influence? Alliances? You mean endless wars we can't even remember the names of? I don't care about that if my neighbor can't afford medicine." Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, raising her eyebrows. "That's a fair point, Cher, but don't you think it's complicated? Pulling out completely could have consequences." Cher's voice grew firmer, almost challenging. "Complicated, yes, but inaction at home is deadly simple. People are suffering now while we pour money into foreign deserts. I can't understand why that's acceptable to anyone." Joy interjected, leaning toward her microphone. "But Cher, can you really isolate domestic problems from international ones? Sometimes foreign engagement prevents disasters that would cost us even more in the long run." Cher's head tilted, her voice rising slightly. "So you're saying we should gamble with our own people's lives to prevent hypothetical disasters? That's insane. I'm talking about real kids, real families, real hospitals." The audience erupted in murmurs and applause, divided between those cheering for Cher's blunt honesty and those nodding at Joy's cautionary logic. Denise Welch, sitting nearby, added, "Cher has a point. Domestic neglect is visible and immediate. People don't feel the abstract dangers overseas. They feel the potholes, the closed schools, the food lines. Joy shot back, arms crossed. But what about responsibility? Global problems eventually reach our shores. If we completely withdraw, we might regret it. Cher leaned forward, pointing toward the camera. I'll take the risk of regrets over the certainty of watching our citizens suffer. How can we call ourselves a superpower if we can't care for our own people first? The audience clapped and whistled. Some waved signs. Some were on the edge of their seats, all captivated by the escalating intensity. The energy in the studio continued to build, each argument sharper, each retort faster. Cher's eyes sparkled with passion. Joy's expressions flickered between disbelief and determination. Even the co-host struggled to interject without getting caught in the rising tension. The debate was no longer just about policy. It was a moral confrontation, a clash of ideology and emotion, and everyone in the room felt the heat. By the time the segment neared its midway point, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a simple discussion. Cher's unwavering stance against foreign spending had set the stage for a full-blown battle of conviction and conscience. The audience leaned in, sensing that the sparks flying on stage were just the beginning.
The moment the audience settled, Joy Behar leaned forward, her tone sharper than before. Cher, I get your passion, I really do, but saying we should pull all money from foreign conflicts ignores the ripple effects. If we abandon our allies, if we stop supporting strategic operations, we could face crises that cost us far more in the long run. Cher's lips curled into a sardonic smile. Ripple effects? Honey, I've been around the world and I can tell you, the people suffering most are our own citizens. Families drowning in debt, children without proper health care, seniors struggling to get by. That's not a ripple effect. That's a tidal wave we're ignoring while politicians play war games overseas. The audience erupted into applause, divided between those who cheered Cher's blunt honesty and those impressed by Joy's calm, reasoned argument. Sonny Hostin tried to interject. Cher, I understand your frustration, but there's a balance to be struck. America has responsibilities. Sometimes short-term pain abroad prevents long-term disasters here. Cher shook her head vehemently. No, you're making it sound like people starving or losing homes is some minor inconvenience while we fight someone else's war. It's not minor. It's life and death. Joy's voice rose slightly, trying to keep pace. And you think ignoring the global stage won't come back to hurt us? It's not about neglect, it's about strategy. You can't separate domestic well-being from international influence entirely. Cher leaned closer to the camera, voice trembling with intensity. I can separate them, because when your people are hurting in front of you, waiting for a crisis abroad is a luxury we can't afford. You're talking about abstract consequences while people are literally suffering in the streets. That's unacceptable. The audience gasped, some clapping in agreement. Co-hosts Whoopi and Sonny exchanged glances, realizing this conversation was teetering on the edge of explosive. Joy crossed her arms, leaning back, her face a mix of frustration and disbelief. Cher, your argument simplifies the complexity of global politics. Sometimes intervention prevents catastrophes that would hit us directly. If we abandon that responsibility, are we really protecting Americans? Cher's voice rose even more, commanding the room. Protecting Americans? By pouring money into endless conflicts while my neighbor can't pay for insulin? That's not protection. That's negligence dressed up as diplomacy. Denise Welch interjected, trying to calm the storm. Cher has a point. People see tangible suffering every day. They see the gap widening, the hospitals underfunded, the schools closing. Watching foreign wars get prioritized over domestic crises feels wrong to them. Joy shot back, frustration evident. And ignoring the global stage entirely? That could make matters worse. We might prevent one disaster here, but create 10 more there. You can't play isolationist and expect everything to be fine. Cher slammed her hand lightly on the table, causing a collective gasp from the audience. Isolationist? I'm talking about prioritizing life over politics, about putting people first. If you can't see the difference, that's your problem, not mine. The studio erupted into murmurs, applause, and occasional laughter at the raw honesty. Some audience members shouted support for Cher, while others nodded at Joy's careful logic. The energy was electric, palpable, and impossible to ignore. Cher leaned back, her eyes flashing at the co-hosts. "I don't care about consequences abroad if our people are dying here. And if that makes me unpopular, so be it. I'm done sugarcoating it." Joy's expression hardened, her tone biting. "Unpopular? Cher, people need to think beyond themselves. This isn't just about who suffers at home. It's about global stability, alliances, and the bigger picture." Cher stood up suddenly, voice rising. "The bigger picture doesn't mean ignoring the people who make your country. You can talk strategy all you want, but I'm looking at real lives, not hypothetical outcomes." The audience erupted into cheers and gasps. The co-hosts leaned forward, some trying to mediate, others simply watching in stunned silence. Denise whispered to Jane Moore, "This is getting intense. I don't know if either of them will back down." Cher's eyes scanned the audience, then fixed on Joy. "I've had enough of hypotheticals, enough of watching lives get sacrificed for political theater. We're failing our own people, and no amount of strategy excuses it." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The audience's reactions oscillated between support and shock, laughter and incredulity. It was clear this debate was no longer just about policy. It had become personal, emotional, and unforgettable. And then, Cher's next words set the stage for an outcome no one expected.
The studio fell into an uneasy quiet as Cher leaned forward, her voice lowering, trembling slightly with emotion. The audience could sense the shift. This was no longer just a policy debate. This was personal. "Joy," Cher began, her eyes locking with hers. "I've traveled the world. I've seen suffering you can't even imagine. I've performed in grand arenas, sure, but I've also stood in neighborhoods where people can't afford heat in the winter, where kids go to bed hungry. And every time I think about government spending billions overseas while that happens, it's unbearable." The audience murmured softly, leaning in. Some clutched their hands, others nodded in quiet agreement. Joy softened slightly, her voice calm but skeptical. "Cher, I understand frustration, I truly do, but these issues aren't mutually exclusive. International engagement doesn't mean abandoning our people." Cher shook her head, her hands gesturing passionately. "It does feel like abandonment. Every time there's a new conflict abroad, there's another school closing, another hospital underfunded. I've seen communities fall apart, Joy, real people, not statistics. And every time the government acts like it's accepted because some greater plan is in motion." The co-hosts leaned in, some murmuring support, some exchanging worried glances. Sonny tried to intervene. "Cher, what about the strategic benefits? Sometimes foreign aid prevents conflicts that would directly impact us." Cher cut her off, her voice rising but steady, trembling with controlled fury. "Sonny, I've had enough of hypotheticals. When a kid in Tennessee can't see a doctor, when a veteran in New York can't get mental health care, tell me how that's hypothetical. I'm talking about real lives. I've spent decades performing, talking, trying to raise awareness, and yet nothing changes." Denise Welch leaned forward, voice gentle. "Cher, I hear your pain, I really do. And you're right, people feel abandoned, they feel invisible. That's the emotional cost of ignoring domestic crises." Cher's eyes glistened as she spoke directly to the camera, addressing viewers at home. "I know some people think I'm just being dramatic, but this isn't drama. It's desperation. Millions of Americans are struggling, while politicians throw money into wars they'll never fight themselves. And I can't sit by quietly anymore. I can't." Joy's face grew serious. "Cher, I understand your anger, but yelling at the screen isn't going to fix systemic issues. We need policy solutions, not just outrage." Cher's voice dropped, firm and unwavering. "Outrage is all that's left when nothing else works. People need to feel seen, heard, and prioritized. That's why I'm here today, to make noise, to make people uncomfortable, to force them to look at the people they've been ignoring." The audience leaned forward in unison, some applauding softly, some silent, struck by the raw intensity of her words. Even Whoopi Goldberg seemed momentarily speechless. Cher's hands trembled slightly as she continued, voice cracking with emotion. "I'm tired of excuses, tired of politics masquerading as concern. We owe it to our citizens to put them first. We owe them more than empty speeches and foreign interventions that don't solve anything for the families here at home." Denise nodded slowly. "That's powerful, Cher, and it's why these conversations matter. Not to pick sides, but to make people feel like their struggles aren't invisible." Cher exhaled deeply, her face a mix of frustration, sadness, and determination. "I've dedicated my life to speaking out, to trying to make a difference, and I refuse to watch this country turn its back on its own people while pretending everything is fine. We can do better, and we must start at home." The audience responded with a standing ovation, some wiping tears, some cheering. The energy was intense, emotional, almost sacred. For a moment, even Whoopi Goldberg seemed taken aback, reflecting on the passion and raw honesty displayed before her. Cher straightened in her seat, voice steadier now, though still brimming with intensity. "This isn't about politics. It's about humanity. If we can't take care of our own people, we have no right to spend recklessly abroad. No right at all." The camera panned across the audience, catching nods, murmurs of agreement, and reflective faces. The co-hosts exchanged glances, realizing the debate had transformed from a clash of policy to a deeply personal plea. But just as the emotional intensity reached its peak, Cher's gaze shifted back to Joy, and the tension in her eyes hinted that the confrontation was far from over.
The atmosphere in the studio had shifted from intense debate to full-blown confrontation. The audience, still murmuring in stunned anticipation, leaned forward as Cher's voice rang with unwavering conviction. Joy Behar, normally quick with a witty retort, now seemed momentarily unsettled by the fire in Cher's eyes. Joy leaned forward, voice tight. "Cher, I respect your passion, I really do, but you can't just dismiss every international obligation. America has commitments that, if ignored, could come back to hurt us in ways that might make your concerns at home even worse." Cher's hands clenched on the table, her gaze never leaving Joy. "Commitments? You mean endless spending on conflicts that don't solve anything, while people can't afford to live, while children go without health care? That's what you're calling commitment? That's negligence." Sonny Hostin interjected, trying to mediate. "Cher, I get your point, but we have to consider the bigger picture. Foreign aid, alliances, strategic interventions, they prevent disasters that could directly impact Americans." Cher leaned forward, her voice rising. "Bigger picture? The bigger picture is that we're letting our own people suffer while politicians play heroes abroad. I've performed for millions, I've donated, I've raised awareness, and yet nothing changes. How can we keep pretending this is acceptable?" Joy shot back sharply, frustration evident. "Cher, simplifying complex international relations into domestic pain doesn't make it better. You're ignoring nuance. You're framing this as if there's only one solution." Cher slammed her palm on the table, the sound echoing across the studio. The audience gasped, some leaning forward in shock, others cheering. "Nuance? I've lived long enough to know that people first always matters. You can't sugarcoat suffering." Denise Welch leaned in, trying to calm things. "Cher, maybe we need to acknowledge both sides. Domestic priorities are critical, but international stability does matter too." Cher's eyes narrowed, voice trembling with controlled fury. "Denise, people are dying while we talk hypotheticals. Children, veterans, the elderly, they're all paying for someone else's wars. That's not stability, that's a tragedy, and anyone defending it as policy is complicit." Joy, visibly exasperated, pushed back. "Cher, your anger doesn't give you the full picture. It doesn't negate the consequences of abandoning obligations. You're being reckless with your rhetoric." Cher stood abruptly, the studio audience gasping at her sudden movement. "Reckless? It's reckless to ignore suffering in front of your eyes. I will not sit quietly while Americans are left behind for political convenience." The co-hosts leaned back, exchanging tense glances, knowing the situation had reached a boiling point. The audience was on the edge of their seats. Cameras zoomed in on Cher, capturing the fire in her eyes, the passion in her stance. Joy's voice softened, trying to reason. "Cher, I understand frustration, but walking away won't change reality." Cher's voice cut through, sharp and resolute. "I am changing reality. I'm standing up, I'm speaking out, and I'm done pretending that discussing abstract consequences is more important than saving lives today." With that, Cher grabbed her jacket from the chair beside her. The studio fell silent. The audience stared, shocked, as she gave Joy a piercing look, her expression unflinching. "And if you can't see that, then I don't need to waste my energy here." With a swift turn, she walked off the set, leaving the co-hosts momentarily speechless. The studio audience erupted in a mix of stunned gasps, applause, and murmurs of disbelief. Whoopi and Sunny exchanged glances, whispering, as the cameras captured the empty space Cher had left behind. "Well," Whoopi said finally, trying to fill the silence, "that was unexpected." The segment ended with a palpable tension still lingering in the air. Social media exploded in real time, hashtags trending instantly, hashtag Cher walks off, hashtag The View, hashtag America First. Clips circulated of her final words and her defiant exit. Fans and critics alike debated whether her walk-off was justified passion or dramatic theatrics. One thing was clear: Cher had made her point unforgettable, leaving an impression that would dominate headlines and online discussions for days. The debate wasn't over. It had only escalated, spilling from the studio into living rooms across the nation.
The cameras lingered on the now empty space where Cher had stormed off, the studio buzzing with a mixture of shock, awe, and admiration. The audience, still murmuring and clapping in scattered bursts, tried to process what had just unfolded. This wasn't just a debate. It was a raw, unfiltered confrontation, one that had exposed deeply personal convictions and unspoken frustrations. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, her voice steady but reflective. "Well, that was something. Cher came here today, and she didn't just speak, she screamed for those who feel ignored, unseen, and forgotten. And whether you agree with her or not, that kind of passion is rare in daytime television." Sonny Hostin nodded, glancing at the crew and audience. It's a reminder that these issues aren't just statistics or policy papers. They're real people, real lives. And when someone points that out with the honesty Cher did, it hits differently. Jane Moore added softly, "You could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about theatrics. It was about speaking for those who don't have a voice, for families struggling while money is sent elsewhere. And sometimes truth looks messy, loud, and uncomfortable." Backstage, producers were already reviewing clips that would go viral within hours. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended globally. Fans celebrated Cher's fearless stance, while critics debated whether walking off was professional or dramatic. Yet everyone agreed on one thing: the message was unmistakable. Whoopi Behar took a deep breath, still seated at the table. Cher didn't leave because she wanted attention. She left because she couldn't stay silent while what she believes is being ignored. And that's something we all need to think about: how we prioritize, how we care, and who we leave behind in the process. Denise Welch leaned in, reflecting quietly. It's easy to get lost in political strategy and the rhetoric of what's best, but at the heart of it, Cher reminded us today that the people who are suffering right here at home deserve the first part of our attention. That doesn't mean foreign policy doesn't matter, but it does mean we have responsibilities that can't be deferred. The audience responded with a standing ovation, many clapping, some wiping tears. There was a sense of witnessing something rare, a celebrity using their platform not for personal glory, but to spotlight issues that hit home for millions. The applause wasn't just for Cher. It was for the courage to speak, for the urgency of empathy, for the reminder that humanity should come before politics. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, her tone thoughtful. Maybe the takeaway here is simple. Passion matters. Voice matters. And sometimes, if people in power won't listen, it's up to others to make sure the conversation can't be ignored. The camera panned across the audience, capturing their reactions, nods of agreement, murmurs of reflection, and a collective recognition that today's episode had transcended entertainment. It had sparked dialogue, provoked thought, and ignited debate. Even after Cher's exit, her words lingered in the air,
a challenge to viewers at home. Who are we serving first? And how far will we go to ensure no one is left behind? As the credits began to roll, the co-hosts offered final reflections, emphasizing the responsibility of citizens to engage, question, and care. Social media notifications were already lighting up, showing that the conversation had gone viral, capturing the attention of millions around the world. The episode closed with an undeniable sense of impact. Cher had walked off the set, but her message remained, bold, uncompromising, and unforgettable. The debate about America's priorities would continue, but for that moment, one thing was clear. Someone had the courage to speak truth to power, and the world had listened. If you enjoyed this unforgettable confrontation, subscribe for more celebrity showdowns, emotional debates, and moments that leave everyone talking. Drop a comment below. Should America focus on domestic needs before foreign conflicts, or is global responsibility equally critical?